I was in my 30s, and I didn't drink. And I started to drink with him before I knew it. I was hung up on this stuff. I couldn't believe it. Same with smoking.
In the constellation of American entertainment, Dick Van Dyke stands as a beacon of wholesome brilliance, a performer whose effortless charm and impeccable comedic timing made him a treasured figure across multiple generations. From his groundbreaking work on The Dick Van Dyke Show, which redefined television's sitcom sophistication, to his enchanting dance with penguins in Mary Poppins, Van Dyke possessed that rare ability to make audiences laugh without ever compromising dignity or decency. His Missouri roots and genuine humility translated into performances that felt both polished and authentic, creating a comedic legacy built on respect rather than ridicule. Yet beneath this affable exterior lay a performer with unwavering principles about comedy's responsibility and purpose in society. Van Dyke's belief that entertainment should uplift rather than demean, that laughter should unite rather than divide, occasionally put him at odds with colleagues whose comedic philosophies embraced more aggressive or self-serving approaches.
She really is not even communicating now. I don't know how bad that is, but it makes me sad.
These weren't petty disputes born from professional jealousy, but fundamental disagreements about the nature of legitimate humor and the entertainer's obligation to their audience. The tensions we examine today reveal how Van Dyke's commitment to family-friendly excellence and collaborative respect sometimes conflicted with fellow performers whose methods he viewed as disrespectful, crude, or ego-driven. These behind-the-scenes conflicts illuminate the character of a man who valued substance over shock, teamwork over stardom, and genuine laughter over manufactured controversy, defending comedy's noble purpose against those who would cheapen it for personal gain. 6. Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason's bombastic personality and domineering stage presence created an inevitable collision with Dick Van Dyke's understated charm and collaborative approach during television comedy's golden age. The self-proclaimed great one, despite his undeniable talent and cultural influence, embodied everything Van Dyke found problematic about performers who confused volume with value and ego with entertainment, particularly when their oversized personalities overshadowed the material itself. The professional friction first emerged during the 1960s, when both comedians were establishing themselves as television's premier entertainers through contrasting philosophies about star power and audience connection. According to sources within TV Guide, Van Dyke allegedly grew frustrated with Gleason's tendency to dominate every scene and conversation, feeling that such behavior demonstrated disrespect for collaborative storytelling. Writer Neil Simon recalled, "Dick believed great comedy came from ensemble work and serving the material, while Jackie seemed to think everything should revolve around showcasing his larger-than-life persona." The ideological divide became more pronounced when Gleason's demanding behavior and prima donna tendencies contrasted sharply with Van Dyke's professional courtesy and generous spirit toward fellow performers. Director Frank Sattenstein observed, "Dick made everyone around him feel important and valued, while Jackie had a way of making it clear that he considered himself the only star that mattered." The tension reached its peak when Gleason made public statements about the importance of commanding presence in television comedy, comments that Van Dyke interpreted as dismissive of collaborative entertainment values. He later reflected, "Real stars make everyone shine brighter. When you're so busy being important that you forget to be entertaining, you've lost sight of why we're here." This philosophy highlighted his belief that authentic leadership in comedy meant elevating others rather than diminishing them. 5. Red Skelton. Red Skelton's old-school variety show approach and reliance on broad physical comedy created a generational philosophical conflict with Dick Van Dyke's sophisticated situational humor and character-driven storytelling during television's evolutionary period. The veteran performer, despite his decades of experience and devoted following, represented a comedic style that Van Dyke found increasingly outdated and disconnected from modern audience sensibilities. The creative discord emerged during the late 1950s when both comedians were competing for similar family entertainment demographics through fundamentally different approaches to humor and performance. According to sources within Variety, Van Dyke allegedly questioned Skelton's reliance on repetitive catchphrases and predictable routines, feeling that such methods showed disrespect for audience intelligence. Comedy writer Carl Reiner recalled, Dick believed comedy should evolve and surprise people, while Red seemed content to repeat the same formulas that worked decades earlier. The philosophical gap widened when Skelton's resistance to television's more intimate format contrasted sharply with Van Dyke's embrace of naturalistic performance and subtle timing. Producer Sheldon Leonard observed, Dick understood that television comedy required a different energy than vaudeville, while Red kept trying to project to the back row of a theater that didn't exist. The professional tension crystallized when Skelton made statements about maintaining traditional comedy values, comments that Van Dyke interpreted as resistance to necessary artistic growth. He later stated, comedy has to grow with its audience. When you're more interested in preserving your old routines than creating new connections with people, you're not really entertaining them anymore. You're just going through the motions. This declaration encapsulated his belief that authentic entertainment required constant evolution rather than nostalgic repetition. 4. Buddy Hackett. Buddy Hackett's crude humor and boundary-pushing material created a fundamental moral conflict with Dick Van Dyke's commitment to family-friendly entertainment and wholesome comedy during their overlapping careers in television and nightclub circuits. The Brooklyn-born comedian, despite his undeniable timing and audience appeal, represented everything Van Dyke found troubling about performers who prioritized shock value over genuine wit and sophistication. The ideological friction first surfaced during the early 1960s, when both comedians were working in similar entertainment venues, but pursuing vastly different approaches to audience engagement. According to sources within Entertainment Weekly, Van Dyke allegedly expressed concern about Hackett's reliance on off-color material and inappropriate humor, feeling that such content degraded comedy's potential to inspire and unite families. Club manager Joey Bishop recalled, Dick always asked about the audience composition before his sets, wanting to make sure his material was appropriate, while Buddy seemed to enjoy pushing boundaries regardless of who was listening. The philosophical divide became apparent when Hackett's willingness to sacrifice dignity for laughs contrasted sharply with Van Dyke's belief that comedy should elevate rather than embarrass. Television producer Aaron Spelling observed, Dick proved you could be hilarious without being crude, while Buddy seemed to think the funnier something was, the more inappropriate it had to be. The professional disagreement reached its most pointed expression when Hackett made public comments defending adult humor in family entertainment venues, statements that Van Dyke found both irresponsible and damaging to comedy's reputation. He later reflected, great comedy doesn't need to hide behind shock or embarrassment. When you have to make people uncomfortable to get a laugh, you're not really entertaining them, you're just catching them off guard. This philosophy highlighted his conviction that authentic humor should bring joy rather than discomfort. 3. Milton Burl. Milton Burl's scene-stealing tendencies and desperate need for attention created an ongoing professional tension with Dick Van Dyke's generous ensemble approach and commitment to collaborative comedy during their encounters in television variety shows. Uncle Milty, despite his pioneering television work and historical significance, embodied everything Van Dyke found disruptive about performers who treated every appearance as an opportunity for personal showcasing rather than collective entertainment. The friction became apparent during guest appearances in industry events where both comedians found themselves sharing stages and spotlight. According to sources within The Hollywood Reporter, Van Dyke allegedly grew frustrated with Burley's tendency to interrupt other performers and hijack comedic moments, feeling that such behavior showed fundamental disrespect for professional courtesy. Writer Mel Brooks recalled, Dick would set up perfect comedic situations for everyone to shine, while Milton would swoop in and try to grab the punchline for himself. The philosophical disagreement intensified when Burley's aggressive pursuit of laughs contrasted sharply with Van Dyke's patient, thoughtful approach to comedic timing and development. Director Greg Garrison observed, Dick understood that the best comedy comes from building moments together, while Milton seemed to think every second he wasn't talking was a wasted opportunity. The professional conflict reached its culmination when Burl made statements about the importance of commanding audience attention, comments that Van Dyke interpreted as justification for selfish performance habits. He later stated, comedy works best when everyone feels included and valued. This declaration perfectly captured his belief that authentic entertainment required generosity rather than greed for audience approval. 2. Don Rickles. Don Rickles' aggressive insult comedy and mean-spirited approach to audience interaction created a profound philosophical conflict with Dick Van Dyke's gentle humor and respectful entertainment style during their parallel careers in nightclub and television comedy. The Merchant of Venom, despite his technical skill and devoted following, represented everything Van Dyke found objectionable about comedians who built their reputations on humiliation rather than genuine wit and warmth. The ideological clash emerged during the 1960s when both performers were establishing themselves in similar entertainment circles, but pursuing diametrically opposed approaches to audience engagement. According to sources within Variety, Van Dyke allegedly expressed dismay at Rickles' willingness to embarrass audience members and fellow performers for comedic effect, feeling that such tactics violated comedy's responsibility to bring joy rather than pain. Comedy club owner Freddie Roman recalled, "Dick would spend time before shows meeting audience members and making them feel welcome, while Don seemed to view them as targets for his next attack." The moral divide became apparent when Rickles' celebration of cruelty contrasted sharply with Van Dyke's belief that comedy should unite rather than divide people. Television producer Carl Reiner observed, "Dick proved you could be devastatingly funny while still treating everyone with dignity, while Don seemed to think humor required making someone else feel small." He later reflected, "Real comedy comes from finding the absurdity in situations, not in attacking people's vulnerabilities. When your humor depends on making others feel bad, you're not really entertaining. You're just being a bully with better timing." 1. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis's manic energy and attention-seeking performance style created an inevitable artistic conflict with Dick Van Dyke's sophisticated physical comedy and ensemble-minded approach during their overlapping careers in family entertainment. The self-proclaimed king of comedy, despite his box office success and international acclaim, embodied everything Van Dyke found problematic about performers who confused hyperactivity with genuine humor and spectacle with authentic entertainment value. The creative tension first surfaced during the 1960s when both comedians were competing for similar family audience demographics through fundamentally different philosophies about comedy's purpose and execution. According to sources within Film Comment, Van Dyke allegedly criticized Lewis's tendency to overwhelm scenes with frantic energy, feeling that such methods showed disrespect for comedic timing and audience intelligence. Director Norman Jewison recalled, "Dick believed comedy should feel effortless and natural, while Jerry seemed to think the harder you worked for a laugh, the funnier it automatically became." These professional conflicts illuminate Van Dyke's unwavering dedication to wholesome, collaborative entertainment that uplifted rather than diminished. His principled approach defended comedy's noble purpose against ego and exploitation. Subscribe for more entertainment revelations.